She was wearing my husband's watch when she told me, "You don't belong here anymore." I froze at the sight of it. That heavy gold piece he never took off in life. Now it glimmered on her wrist, almost mocking me. She leaned back against the leather chair in the study, my chair, and crossed her legs as if she owned not only the watch, but the air I was breathing. "You should leave quietly," she said, her voice syrupy and cruel. He wanted me to have it all. I clenched my hands together so tightly my nails bit into my palms. That line, "he wanted me to have it all," burned. I had been the one who built this home with him, who raised every dollar alongside him, who held his hand in hospital rooms. And now this woman, this mistress, dared to claim it. The family lawyer cleared his throat. He wouldn't even look me in the eyes. "The documents are clear," he murmured, adjusting his glasses. His words felt rehearsed, like he'd been warned not to stand too close to me. My voice shook, but I kept it steady enough. "I'll read every word myself." Her smirk widened, as if my defiance amused her. "Do that," she whispered, twisting the watch around her wrist, making sure I saw it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab the watch and rip it off her hand, but instead, I swallowed the rage, because rage without proof was nothing. Dignity had to be my weapon now. I glanced around the study. The oak shelves, the smell of old paper, the framed photographs, all reminders of the life I had lived here. But something felt wrong, a shadow of absence. His presence wasn't in this room anymore. It had been replaced by her perfume and her laughter. The lawyer handed her a folder. She tapped it with a manicured nail. "Here's the will. Everything goes to me. The house, the accounts, the businesses, everything." I forced myself to take the folder. My hands trembled, but I opened it anyway. My husband's signature was there, but it didn't look right. Too sharp, too rushed. And the date, just days before he died. "You expect me to believe this?" I asked. My voice was sharper now. The lawyer finally looked at me. His eyes flickered with something, fear? Guilt? "I'm afraid the paperwork is valid. We can contest it, but it would be difficult." Her laughter rang out, bright and cutting. "Contest? Oh, darling, don't embarrass yourself. He left you with nothing. And you know why? Because you weren't enough." My chest tightened, but I refused to let her see me break. I lifted my chin. "Then I'll start with this will. Line by line, word by word. If he left me nothing, I'll find out for myself." For the first time, her smile faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it, and it gave me the strength to turn my back on her and walk out of the room without another word. Still, as I crossed the hall, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was being hidden from me. I found myself wandering into his private study, the room he never let anyone touch without his permission. My eyes scanned the shelves, the desk, the locked cabinets. And then I saw it. A drawer, tucked low, its handle smooth from years of use. But this time it didn't open. It was locked. I knelt down tugging at it, my heart pounding. My husband had never locked anything from me before. "Why this drawer? Why now?" I pressed my ear against it as if I could hear the secret inside. I whispered, "What did you leave me, love?" But the lock stayed firm, silent, and that silence told me more than words ever could. Something important was in there. Something she didn't want me to find. I rose slowly, staring at the drawer as if it were daring me to uncover its secret. And I promised myself, no matter what it took, I would find the key because I knew. The truth was still hidden here, and I would not leave this house until I had it. They handed me a box of my clothes at the gate, like I was the help being dismissed. The guard didn't even meet my eyes. He just dropped the cardboard box into my arms and muttered, "That's all they let you take." My dresses, folded carelessly, smelled faintly of the cedar closets where I once stored them. Now, they felt like scraps, as if my whole life had been shoved into a box and tossed out like garbage. I turned back once. The mansion stood tall and perfect under the morning sun, its windows glinting like cold eyes. That house had been my home for 20 years. I had decorated every room, hosted every holiday, and poured my life into it. But now, its doors were closed to me. I carried the box down the street myself. "No car? No driver. Just me and the bitter taste of exile. The apartment I found was small, 2 rooms above a noisy diner, the kind of place where the walls smelled of grease and the pipes rattled when the heat kicked on. I set the box on the floor and sat beside it, my knees pulled to my chest. For a moment, I let the weight of it all sink in. My husband was gone. My home was stolen. My accounts frozen. And the woman wearing his watch had declared herself the victor. But as the pipes hissed and the smell of fried onions drifted up from below, I made a vow to myself. I wasn't done. The first crack in her story came quietly, almost by accident. My husband's longtime secretary, Anne, called me late one evening. Her voice was low, almost trembling. He told me things, she whispered. He didn't trust her. He said, if anything happens, she mustn't touch the papers. My breath caught. What papers, Anne? Did he say where? She hesitated, then sighed. He was careful. Too careful. But I know he left something behind. Don't stop looking. Her words lit a fire inside me. He had tried to protect me. I just had to find what he left. The next lead came from the bank. I walked in with shaking hands, clutching the little money I had left. The banker, a man I'd known for years, shifted uncomfortably as he scanned my name in the system. There was another file, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. But access is restricted. I'm sorry. Without the right key or court order, he trailed off, glancing at the cameras on the ceiling. I leaned in. Please, tell me one thing. Did he put it there himself? The banker's lips tightened, but his eyes answered for him. That night, in my cramped apartment, I spread every document I had across the floor. Old bills, account statements, letters. I dialed number after number, piecing together fragments of information. Somewhere in this mess was the thread that would unravel her lies. But every call ended the same way. Closed accounts, transferred assets, frozen balances. The mistress had moved fast, sealing every door behind me. Still, Anne's whisper echoed in my ears. If anything happens, she mustn't touch the papers. I was sure now. The will she flaunted wasn't the real one. My husband had hidden the truth, and he had trusted me enough to find it. The despair that had wrapped around me since the day she slipped on his watch began to loosen, just slightly. For the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. I began keeping a notebook, jotting down every clue, every odd detail. Dates circled, names underlined, a map of his last days slowly forming on the page. I didn't have money. I didn't have power. But I had memory and I had patience. And sometimes, those were stronger weapons than diamonds and lawyers. 2 weeks passed in that tiny apartment. Each night I whispered to myself before bed, he left me something, and I will find it. Then, one evening, I came home to find an envelope slipped under my door. No return name, no markings, just my name written across the front in a hand I almost recognized. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. My fingers trembled as I picked it up. Someone knew where I was. Someone wanted me to see this. I held it against my chest, afraid to open it, afraid not to. Whatever was inside could change everything. The handwriting on the envelope was my husband's, dated 1 week before he died. My knees weakened as I sank onto the edge of the bed, the single lamp casting a pale glow across the cramped room. The apartment smelled faintly of fried food from the diner below, but in that moment, all I could smell was the faint trace of his cologne that still lingered in my memory. My hands shook as I traced the letters of my name written in his careful script. I whispered, almost afraid, "What did you leave me, love?" With a slow breath, I broke the seal. Ash-gray dust clung to the flap as if time itself had scorched it. Inside, folded neatly, were several pages written in his unmistakable hand. But as I scanned the first lines, my heart dropped. It wasn't written plainly. The words were twisted, coded with inside jokes, half-phrases, and references only the two of us would understand. I read aloud softly, my voice breaking. The roses by the east fence still bloom in November. I frowned. He wasn't talking about flowers. That was our phrase for danger, something we'd whispered once during a stormy trip when we needed to keep a secret. I kept reading. His words grew darker. He spoke of manipulation, of someone who whispered in his ear, promising loyalty while slowly draining his trust. My breath caught. He knew. He knew she was after him. And then I found the line that made my blood run cold. The real will is where you always said we kept our future safe. I pressed the page to my chest. My mind raced. He was talking about the study safe, the one behind the shelves. But even as hope flared, confusion followed. The pages weren't complete instructions. They were riddles, breadcrumbs scattered for me to follow. I laid the sheets across the table, whispering to the empty room. You left me breadcrumbs, didn't you? The silence of the apartment pressed against me, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator. I closed my eyes and forced myself to think. Dates, numbers. He always tied things to anniversaries. Birthdays, milestones we shared, a memory surfaced. His voice one night, teasing me as we celebrated our 10th anniversary. If you ever doubt, follow the dates. He had smiled as he tapped his watch, the same watch now wrapped around her wrist. I leaned over the papers again, piecing it together. The day we met, the day we married, our son's birthday. Those numbers formed a sequence that could only be one thing: the combination. As I worked through the riddles, tears blurred my vision. He hadn't abandoned me. He hadn't chosen her. He had been trying to shield me, even as death crept close. And if he had suspected foul play? My stomach twisted. Could she have had a hand in his death? The thought burned, but I pushed it aside for now. First, I needed proof. I whispered to myself, stronger this time. The will is in the safe. I know it. I gathered the papers carefully, folding them back into the envelope. My heart steadied, no longer pounding from fear, but from determination. Standing at the window, I looked out at the city lights flickering against the dark. The mansion loomed in my memory, every corridor etched in my mind. I knew the path to that study better than anyone. I had dusted those shelves, placed those books, and I knew the safe was still there, waiting. But now it was no longer my home. It was enemy territory, guards, locks, eyes ready to turn me away. Still, I had no choice. I sat back down on the bed, clutching the envelope. My husband's words seemed to whisper through the room, urging me forward. He had trusted me to finish what he started. Shock gave way to something fiercer, hotter. I wasn't the broken widow she wanted me to be. I was his wife, his true partner, and tomorrow night I would go back into that house, not as a guest, not as a beggar, but as the woman who carried the truth in her hands. I closed the envelope slowly, pressing my lips against his handwriting one last time. Then I whispered into the dark. Wait for me, love. I'm coming to take back what's ours. Because I knew my next step was to walk back into that mansion, unseen, and open the safe that held the truth. I stood outside the home I once owned, holding the passcode in shaking hands. The gate's keypad glowed faintly in the darkness, numbers waiting for me to betray myself. For a moment, I stared at the digits, remembering the countless nights I had returned through this very gate, greeted by my husband's smile. Now I was an intruder, a shadow pressed against the cold iron. The code slipped from my trembling lips, our wedding anniversary. The lock clicked open with a sound that seemed deafening in the silence. My pulse thundered in my ears as I slipped inside, careful to keep to the shadows. The mansion looked different under the cover of night, colder, harder. Security cameras blinked red, tracking every angle. I crouched low, slipping across the yard until I found the side entrance to the study. My hand shook as I picked the smaller lock with a pin I had brought, my breath catching when it finally gave way. Inside, the air smelled of her perfume. Sweet, suffocating. I forced myself not to gag. The study that had once been my sanctuary was now her domain. My eyes darted across the shelves, the familiar desk, the rug we had chosen together, and then I went straight to the wall where the safe was hidden. I ran my fingers along the wood paneling, pressing lightly. A faint click echoed as the false wall shifted open, revealing the steel door. Relief flooded me. He hadn't moved it. It was still here. The combination came to me instantly. The day we met, the day we married, and our son's birthday. My fingers hesitated only once before turning the dial. The safe clicked open, and my breath caught. Inside lay folders, neatly stacked, as though waiting for me. I pulled them out one by one, receipts, contracts, papers. My hands froze when I saw them. Forged documents, signed in shaky handwriting meant to mimic his. And tucked alongside them were receipts showing payments. Large sums transferred to the lawyer I had once trusted. My stomach clenched. Proof. Proof of everything she had done. And there, beneath it all, lay the envelope I had been searching for. Thicker, heavier, stamped with the seal of his notary. My husband's real will. Tears blurred my vision, but I couldn't stop smiling. "Not tonight, darling," I whispered into the quiet room, clutching the envelope to my chest. "Tonight, I take back what's mine." I pulled out my phone, snapping photographs of every forged paper, every incriminating receipt. Each click of the shutter felt like another step toward justice. And then, a voice outside the window jolted me. "All clear?" A guard called faintly from the driveway. I froze, holding my breath, listening for footsteps. Seconds stretched like hours. The guard shuffled away, muttering into a radio. I pressed a hand to my chest, forcing my heartbeat to calm. Too close. Gathering the documents quickly, I returned them to the safe, leaving everything exactly as I had found it, except for the will and the photographs on my phone. I slid the wall back into place, erasing my trail. With the envelope tucked under my coat, I turned toward the door. Every muscle in my body was buzzing with adrenaline, fear mixing with exhilaration. I had it, the proof, the truth. But just as I reached for the handle, I froze again, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway. Headlights swept across the curtains. My blood went cold. The front door opened, and I heard her voice. The Mistress. She was home, hours earlier than I had expected. Her heels clicked against the marble foyer as she hummed to herself, dropping keys on the table. I backed away from the study door, clutching the envelope tighter. My heart hammered so loudly I was certain she would hear it. The knob of the study door turned slowly, and I was trapped inside. She strolled into court in diamonds, sure of her victory. I had only a plain folder in my hands. The courtroom air buzzed with whispers. Relatives craning to see which widow would emerge victorious. Reporters scratching notes as though it were theater. For me, it was no play. It was the final act of survival. The Mistress sat across from me, draped in jewels that sparkled like weapons under the fluorescent lights. Her lawyer smirked, sliding a stack of papers toward the judge. "Your Honor, the will is clear. My client is the sole beneficiary. Her late partner made his wishes unmistakable." I stayed still, folding my hands over the folder in my lap. Let them gloat, let them believe. It would make the truth sharper when it cut. The judge, a gray-haired man with sharp eyes, lifted the so-called will. Signed, dated, notarized. "Do you dispute this, Mrs. Harrow?" Every eye turned toward me. My throat tightened, but I stood, steadying my voice. "Yes, Your Honor. I dispute it entirely." The Mistress's head snapped toward me. "She's lying!" she shrieked, bracelets clattering as she slammed her hand on the table. "Order!" the judge barked. I walked slowly to the bench, each step measured. "This will," I said, tapping the document her lawyer had presented, "is not my husband's voice." "It is hers!" Gasps rippled through the gallery. Her lawyer rose. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. The notary stamp is valid. The signature is his. Is it?" I opened my folder and drew out enlarged photocopies. Compare this signature to his passport, his driver's license, even his checks. My husband's hand was steady, precise. "This," I lifted the forged will. "This signature trembles. Look at the loops, the slant. It is not his hand." The judge leaned forward, scrutinizing, his brow furrowed. "And here," I continued, sliding another sheet forward, "the date, altered, ink laid over ink." I consulted a handwriting specialist who confirmed it. The date was changed to fit her story. The Mistress leapt to her feet, her face blotched red. "She's fabricating everything! This is slander!" "Sit down, Ms. Vale," the judge ordered, his gavel striking once. I breathed deeply and pulled the final weapon from my folder. A sealed envelope. its wax notary seal still unbroken until I placed it on the judge's desk. "This," I said softly, my voice carrying in the silence, "is my husband's true will. Kept safe, protected, waiting." The courtroom fell into stunned quiet. Even her lawyer's smug smile faltered. I stepped back, letting the weight of the moment hang. Then I added the nail in her coffin. Along with the real will, I uncovered receipts, payments made to the very lawyer who presented her case, bribes to ensure her forged document looked legitimate. I submit these as evidence. The judge's face darkened as he flipped through the receipts. The mistress's shriek echoed through the chamber. "Lies! She planted them!" I stood straighter, calmer than I had felt in months. "Your Honor," I said, my voice low but steady. This is my husband's true voice beyond the grave. He trusted me to bring it here, to make sure it was heard." The judge raised a hand, silencing the chaos that had erupted in the gallery. He turned to the bailiff. "Take these documents into custody. Begin an immediate review of the signatures and financial records." His gavel slammed down again. "This court will not be a stage for fraud." The mistress's lawyer sank into his chair, sweat shining on his forehead. She, on the other hand, was nearly foaming with rage, pointing at me with shaking hands. "She'll pay for this. Do you hear me? Enough," the judge thundered. I returned to my seat, my plain folder now empty, my heart thudding not with fear but with triumph. The weight I had carried for weeks seemed to lift, little by little, replaced by the sharp clarity of justice. The judge's final words struck like a hammer. "This court orders that Ms. Vale be investigated immediately for fraud, bribery, and potentially more serious crimes connected to the death of Mr. Harrow." The mistress froze, her mouth open in silent shock, and in that silence, I allowed myself one small smile. The battle was not over, but the tide had turned. She looked at me like a trapped animal when the bailiff stepped toward her. The courtroom had emptied of its usual chatter, silence pressing against the walls as the gavel's echo faded. Reporters scribbled furiously in the gallery, their cameras already flashing, immortalizing her downfall. Her diamonds glittered under the harsh lights, but on her face there was only terror. "Please," she hissed as the bailiff touched her arm. "We can share. Don't ruin me." I held her gaze, steady and unflinching. "You ruined yourself the moment you forged his name." The judge's orders had been clear. Fraud, bribery, and further investigation into her role in my husband's death. The lawyer beside her buried his face in his hands, trembling. When pressed by the judge, he cracked like brittle glass. "She paid me. I falsified the papers. It wasn't his signature. It was never real." His confession rang through the courtroom like a church bell, final and damning. Outside, the courthouse steps were a frenzy. Microphones thrust toward me, voices overlapping. "Mrs. Harrow, how does it feel? Did you expect her to be exposed today? Do you believe she had a hand in your husband's death?" I kept walking, chin lifted, the plain envelope tucked tightly under my arm. For weeks, I had lived as if I were invisible, dismissed, cast aside. Now every camera pointed at me, every eye demanded my story. Behind me, the mistress's voice rose, shrill and breaking as she was led away. He loved me. He wanted me to have it all. I turned once, just enough for her to see my expression, calm as steel. "Then why did he hide everything from you?" She flinched as though struck. The press swarmed closer, pushing microphones nearly against my face. I caught sight of the banker who had slipped me that first clue, standing at the edge of the crowd, his eyes lowered in quiet acknowledgement. The secretary, too, gave me the briefest nod before vanishing into anonymity again. They had risked much, and I would not forget. In the days that followed, the authorities dug deeper. Debts surfaced, gambling, extravagant spending, quiet blackmail she had attempted against others. The fortune she pretended to control had already been slipping through her fingers, eaten by her greed long before she reached for mine. Her empire was built on illusions, and now it collapsed piece by piece. I refused every offer, every whispered plea. "We can share," she had begged again when I visited the estate to reclaim it officially, her voice hoarse from weeping. But I only shook my head. "I shared my husband with you once, and it destroyed everything. Never again." The estate returned to me, Not just its bricks and marble, but its dignity. I walked its halls not as a widow abandoned, but as a woman who had fought for the truth and won. The forged papers were locked away by the authorities. The real will, preserved and executed, restored what was rightfully mine. Vindication came not as fire, but as quiet strength. I felt no need to gloat, no hunger for revenge. The truth was enough. Justice was enough. On the morning the court officially recognized the real will, I visited his grave. I laid a single white rose against the stone, whispering, "I followed the dates. I heard your voice, and I didn't let you down." As I turned to leave, reporters once more crowded the gates of the cemetery, relentless in their hunger for words. "Mrs. Harrow," one called out, "what will you do now with your victory?" I paused, the weight of every battle, every sleepless night pressing against me. The cameras clicked, waiting for a statement that would define me. And I smiled faintly, letting the silence stretch a moment too long before I answered. I turned the key in the door, not as a trespasser, but as the rightful heir. The lock gave way with a soft click, and the heavy oak door swung open. For weeks, this house had been a fortress against me, holding secrets, betrayal, and the stench of someone else's perfume. But now, as I stepped across the threshold, it felt different, lighter, as if the walls themselves were exhaling after being forced to keep a lie. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, falling across the marble floor. The silence was no longer hostile. It was mine again. I walked slowly, letting my fingertips brush against familiar furniture. Every piece had been chosen with care, every room once filled with laughter and warmth, yet ghosts of recent months whispered in corners. The mistress's voice echoing where it never belonged. The sting of being cast out. I paused in the study, the place where so much of this battle began. The scent of old books, leather, and wood polish greeted me, almost soothing. It was here he had left his breadcrumbs, his trust in me, his hidden truths. On instinct, I opened the desk drawer. Inside, beneath neatly stacked papers, I found an envelope in his handwriting. My breath caught. The seal was unbroken, the ink slightly faded but still strong. Hands trembling, I unfolded the letter. "My dearest," it began. "If you are reading this, it means life has forced your strength to rise higher than either of us wished. I feared she would try to twist what we built, to take what was never hers, but I trusted you would find the truth. Not for money, not for power, but for yourself. For us." Tears blurred the words as I continued. "You are my heart's keeper. Whatever storms come, fight. Fight for your dignity, for your name, for the love we shared. And when the battle ends, promise me this, that you will live, not in bitterness, but in peace. That you will let this home be yours again as it always was. My last gift is not wealth, but freedom. Yours forever." I pressed the paper to my chest, my shoulders shaking as I whispered, "We did it, love. We did it." Carefully, I placed the letter in a silver frame and set it on the desk where he once worked. It glowed in the sunlight, a beacon of both memory and renewal. From there, I began restoring the house, not with decorators or servants, but with my own hands. I pulled open curtains long drawn shut, let fresh air sweep through rooms stifled by secrets. I stacked away the gaudy trinkets she had brought, replacing them with family photographs, with simple flowers in crystal vases. Each small act was a reclaiming, a stitch mending the torn fabric of home. Though memories of betrayal lingered, her voice in the courtroom, the smirk she once wore, I let them drift into the past. They no longer had power here. In the evening, I stood in the grand hall, listening to the quiet hum of the house around me. For the first time in months, the silence was not loneliness. It was peace. As I locked the door for the night, I turned back once more, my eyes falling on the framed letter in the study. Its words echoed softly in my mind, filling the home like a benediction. A voice rose within me, steady and certain, carrying beyond the walls as though it were meant to be spoken aloud. She thought she took everything. But what she never had was my strength. If you believe dignity and truth should always win over greed, Don't forget to subscribe and share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here.